Hi again. This next session, we are going to be discussing and reviewing some of the things that are important to remember as we're doing inductive study. By this point, I am believing that you have already read through the letter to the Galatians at least once out loud. If not, I'm actually going to give some tips as to what to look for and how to make your out loud reading more effective. So, where do we begin? Well, at the risk of sounding cliche, you always begin with prayer. The Word of God is not something that is of human origin, strictly speaking. It is not something that is really easy for our natural mind to understand. In fact, I don't believe it's possible for our natural mind to understand it. So we need the help of God. We need His Spirit in order to really hear what He is saying. So step one, of course, is prayer. But after you've prayed, after you have put your heart at rest and really prepared your mind for hearing, you want to read the text out loud. Now, why do we even do that? You've probably already heard in previous lessons about the importance of this, but I just want to underscore this one more time. This is important because when we hear, when we see, when we speak, each of these things makes connections in our mind. And the more of those connections we make, the more this Word of God is embedded in our thinking and in our memory. That's important. But the second thing I would say about this, and what makes reading out loud so important, is that when we read out loud, we have to slow down typically. And also when we hear it, we tend to read it in such a way that it sounds more conversational. The advantage of this is that this is conversational. This was intended to be read out loud in front of the churches. When Paul sent a letter to the church, he didn't send hundreds of them so everybody could have a copy. He sent one, and this was read out loud and explained to them by the leadership of the church. So, in order to hear it the way that it was intended to be heard, we really should read it out loud and read it in a conversational way and at a conversational speed. If we read this artificially fast, if we don't take any breaks, if we don't make any pauses, if we run all the words and sentences together, it's not going to sound like language. It's going to just be words, and we're going to miss so much. So I would give you this strong encouragement. Take your time, read out loud, and read it in a natural, conversational way. Allow the words, give yourself the time to let the language really function like language, so that it sounds right, so that it sounds like one person talking to another person. When you do this, the whole feeling of the letter will change, and instead of being just a bunch of words to plow through, it will begin to sound like one person talking to another person, which I think completely changes the experience of reading the Scriptures. The Scriptures then become alive. They're not stale. So don't hurry through your out loud readings, or don't feel like, well, this is dumb. There's nobody in the room. Why am I reading this out loud? Take the time to hear the Word of God the way that it was intended, because the intention of these letters were to be read out loud in public. And so if you want to hear them the way the early church heard them, if you want to hear them the way the original recipients of these letters heard them, you want to say it out loud and you want to talk normal. So don't rush it. It's so good. What are we looking for? The other thing I would caution you against is trying to do too much in your first reading. The first reading really should be a reading that gives you a sense and a feeling of what the author is trying to say. You should read it just like you would read any letter. If someone were to mail you a letter, you just read it. and you listen to it, and you try to get a sense for the person's mood. You try to get a sense of, what is this person trying to say? What is bothering this person? What is this person excited about? Why did this person write this letter? These are the kind of questions you should be asking. Like, imagine you're the Galatian church and you're hearing this for the first time. Ask those obvious questions. Why did Paul write us this letter? What's he trying to say? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he upset? Is he joyful? What is he? Is this encouragement? Is this correction? What is this? So just ask the obvious questions and don't try to do too much in that first reading. Let the letter just flow like a letter and try to get those big picture ideas out of it. Why did he write this? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he correcting? Is he teaching? What is he doing? What's the point? Is there a particular point to this letter? Is there some obvious reason that he wrote it? Does he say why he wrote it? Listen for things like this, and it will help you. It will help really open up the letter to you as you get into the details of it. And I'm going to use a word now. I'm going to say message. Look for the message. Often, the biggest hurdle in studying the Bible is that we will hear a passage, a sentence, a word, a figure of speech, something like this, that will be unclear, difficult to understand. And our brain will kind of just crash land right there, and we will forget everything else and just be thinking about, oh, what does this mean? Please don't do that, especially in your early readings, because the details are there to support the message. What you're looking for in these early readings is, what is the message? Basically, what is Paul trying to say to the Galatians in this case? You want to know the message because the details support the message. And so in order to understand the context of the details, in order to understand the context of the figures of speech, you need to understand the message. In that sense, you can say that the message is the context. Now, in the SBS, we have several sayings that are useful. The first one I want to give you today is this. Use the clear to understand the obscure. What am I saying by that? The message is the main thing the author's trying to get across. You're going to see Paul in this letter, for example, repeat certain ideas over and over again. Why? Because they are the core of his message. But he will also throw in some things that are a little more obscure, a little more abstract. What do you do with them? Well, you have to understand that those things, those obscure references to other parts of the Bible, or maybe an illustration that you're not quite sure, how does that make sense, or something, those things are all there for a reason. Paul includes them to support his main message. They are there in support of the message. And really, they will only make sense in the context of that message. So in these early readings, you really want to take a message-first approach, because this will be enormously helpful to you later when you get into difficult passages, figures of speech, illustrations and references to the Old Testament. When you're wondering, why is Paul bringing up this story? What is he trying to say? You need to go back and think of that as, okay, this is an illustration that Paul is giving to help us understand his message. I understand the message, so now my question is not, what does this weird thing mean? The question becomes more of, how does this reference or this phrase or this illustration, how does this help me understand the message that Paul is giving more clearly? And this will help us sleep at night. If you're the detailed kind of person that can't sleep without knowing every detail, this will be very helpful for you, because you may have trouble with all the details, but the message will be very simple. And whether you're looking at something as symbolic and difficult as Revelation, or whether you're reading something quite straightforward like the book of Acts, where it's basically just a history, it's a story. No matter what, there is a message there, and that's what you got to go after first. So, in your early readings, don't try to do too much. Focus on the message, read it naturally, and try to get a sense of what is being said and why. All right, in our next session, we're going to look at structure.